Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Retro Encounter. I'm your host Josh Curry. With me is Davi Tesnovich.
And it's a beautiful day.
Mike Sollosi.
And it's a freezing day. Get out of here, winter.
And Peter Triezenberg.
It's too early for this crap.
As you can tell, all of us are super happy to be here.
I am.
I would be much happier to be back in bed, but this is fine.
This is my mid-afternoon.
East Coast problems.
Yeah, exactly. We are here to talk about To the Moon.
To the moon!
I knew Davey would have something. Yeah, so this is part of our month of Indie Month. We played Gone Home earlier in the month. We're playing To the Moon now, and then later on is Juniper's Knot. So this is going to be one condensed podcast episode where we talk about the entirety of the game. Let's just start off with, I think this is new for everybody except for Davey, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, this is my first time playing the game.
Okay, yeah. And Davey, you played this one and it first came out is what we were able to figure out, right?
Yeah.
So and the nice thing is it's been a while since it came out, so it's almost, for everybody out here, it's a new experience, or it's been a while, I think, enough that Davey didn't remember everything, right?
Yeah, it was super fresh.
I just want to delve into this. This is a very different game for me.
How so? I'm curious.
I think this game is really smart in how it does this. The website we work for is rpgfan.com.
Really?
I know, right? So there's a certain expectation then that, hey, this is going to be an RPG. I know this month's a little bit different than that. You're not going to have levels, you're not going to have grinding out and whatnot.
Well, I mean, alright, okay, keep going before I comment on what games RPG
Right, yeah, I know. It's just like, and I get that. I know I'm being
They
super
do
reductive.
parody RPG battle at one point. They do
Right,
a parody battle,
So
which is funny.
I came in kind of expecting something similar to Gone Home, where there's just a story, we're going to pluck through it, there's going to be a little bit of exploration, and we're going to have that. And then we jumped into, hey, we're going to fight this squirrel, which super threw me for a loop. But then I almost kind of liked it, because it was absurd, and I think I would have rather that than how the game actually went through. I found the game to be plotting, I guess. It seems like one ginormous fetch quest. And that's typically like my least favorite thing about most games. I think the story is, from what I was able to decipher and what I saw, or I paid attention to, like, I seemed to really enjoy it. I thought the characters were well done. But it was everything in between the characterization, everything between the story that I just could not stand.
I think I told you this before the show too. Is I kind of thought that the gameplay segments were fine, but it could do without them, because your main interaction with the game outside of reading dialogue is clicking, aside from a couple contextual mini games, is just clicking on stuff to arbitrarily unlock the next warp point to go back into this guy's memories, and then you have to solve a little slide puzzle that isn't difficult. It just kind of takes time, and then you progress with it. And I feel like it's kind of arbitrary, like we had to put this game element in there for it to be a game, when the real strength of this game, I think, is the story and the audio-visual presentation, because it looks great, like really great, like kind of 16-bit sprite work, and the music is phenomenal. But I was definitely more into it for those elements than I was to solve the next puzzle.
Yeah, this isn't this isn't a Witness or even a Layton game. The puzzles are really, I felt they were unnecessary, even though I don't mind color switching or sliding puzzles. Really, going back to, we work for RPG Fan, we play RPGs. RPG Fan also covers Zelda games, basically because a lot of people on staff liked Zelda games, and we've always covered them. And it also covers a lot of adventure games and puzzle visual novels, because the RPG fan base crosses over with the fan bases of those sort of games quite a bit. So it's a little bit nebulous exactly what kind of games RPG Fan covers, but that's a separate conversation.
Yeah, and I didn't want to get into that conversation. It just
but sort of piggybacking on to what I said, really, To the Moon is an adventure game that's sort of disguised as a 16-bit RPG. It has like the framework of a 16-bit RPG because you're moving around in, like SNES Final Fantasy sort of visuals.
Tile-based environments.
Yep, exactly, sure. Tile-based environments. But really all you're doing is getting to the next dialogue points and experiencing a story that's in an interactive format rather than a strictly linear format.
Yeah,
I think it's an adventure game or a visual novel and not really an RPG.
I don't. There's a connotation to this, but I'm going to say it anyways. In a lot of ways, it's a walking simulator.
I hate that term.
I know,
okay.
I do too. But it works well. There's a lot of parallels to this in Gone Home. You're given a space. You have to wander around. You have to find the next clue to be able to progress. And I guess to its credit, it broke the mold on making it like have the visual display that it did, not being in first person. But I guess, and this is my fault, but I came in with preconceived notions of what this game would be, and I was excited for that, and what it ended up being made me feel underwhelmed.
And you sort of disliked the fetch quest nature of it and thought that it was poorly paced because of the, slowly walking around looking for the next clues kind of side of it.
Yeah, and so so if you haven't played the game, you're just listening to the podcast. The whole point of the game is there's a guy dying. He pays for this company to have his dreams fulfilled, and to do that, you come in and you basically do an Inception type event, and you go back through his memories to be able to insert a memory to make it happen in real life in his mind.
And
it's a really cool concept.
And his dying wish is to go to the moon, so you're trying to alter his memories and in a way that he remembers visiting the moon.
Right. And so while you're going through these memories, you have to start from basically the most recent memory and work your way back to his childhood. In each memory, you have to find 5 different dots, essentially, that are fragments to be able to move on to the previous memory because they get enough artifacts to be able to move back. I would have been more okay. It would have been less fetchy to me instead of having collect those 5. You collect those 5 so you can unlock the final artifact, essentially. I would have been okay with you just had to find that final artifact. Boom, you go, and this would kind of solve what Peter was saying, was like, you don't have to do the slime puzzles, which I actually had zero problem with the slime puzzles. They were fine. But it was that I felt like a lot of times it was being in your head. Like, a lot of those artifacts, it's like, well, I have to go to the platypus every time. Or I have to go to this folded rabbit every time. It's like, well, that's not really adding to the story for this memory. It's just there. And it's like, hey, remember this, remember this, remember this? It's going to be important possibly someday.
Well, and a lot of the time,
they even mentioned it once that, oh wow, I should know that there's going to be a memory ball thing here every time I see a platypus,
right?
Because that platypus doll shows up in more than half of the scenes.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it seems like those memory fragments are there just to get you to trigger the next scene. Like you have to go to a certain place in order to get the next memory link or whatever. But
yeah, and they gate you in some instances where you literally can't leave a room if you don't find something.
Yeah, but there's no but a lot of times there's no reason why they couldn't just have like one memory fragment that you can't get until you've seen everything. So I'm not sure if there's a way to improve the way they structured those segments, but
I didn't mind how those segments were structured. It basically it seemed extremely arbitrary to have to go find the 5 dots that you need in a given space, but it also is in a way pushes the player to explore the space of each scene, and I think that's not a bad idea. Basically, the player should be checking out every space in this memory before they can proceed. So, and having to do a sort of mini fetch quest that never takes more than 5 or 10 minutes isn't such a bad way to do it.
But we're delving just in a game design, but why should the player have to look around?
Yeah, it should be optional for sure.
I would make the argument that there should be a layer of story and a layer of understanding and connection that you make with the characters if you just streamline your way through it. But if you're willing to look around and you all of a sudden you're like, oh, there is a platypus always here, or there's a soccer ball in most of these scenes, like that's interesting that this kind of like went through time, or like the Animorph books. Like there is
Animorph books.
I loved that reference.
Yeah, and then it
Those
pissed
are like
me
the-
off that it was wrong.
It was. I know.
Well-
Like because I remembered reading those books when I was a kid, and I was like, yeah, they got their trivia piece wrong.
Yeah, which I looked up,
Well-
and then it makes sense eventually.
Yeah, the idea is that Joey was the one that read Animorphs.
Yeah, not Johnny. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I the only character I remember from Animorphs was Tobias, so and that wasn't the bit of trivia that they were asking about. So I needed the in-game context to tell me what the answer to the trivia question was.
And I love it. So, and this is like a perfect example where she's like, "You could have Googled it." Like,
Yeah.
I love how self-aware the game is. Like, and every time there is a humor to them breaking the fourth wall, essentially. And
Yeah, I mean,
that was really well done.
Even when you were
I-
talking about how that squirrel battle threw you off, I thought the squirrel battle was hilarious because it was like it was tricking you. It's in the first 20 minutes of the game or so, but it's tricking you a little bit, making the players think, oh, there's going to be random battles and grinding in this RPG, and then it's such a not like when the squirrel battle basically doesn't happen. It's like psych.
It was so smart.
There's no fighting in this RPG.
It'd be like picking up a
The-
battle rifle and gone home.
The best line is don't never cock block somebody during a Kamehameha.
Yeah.
Yeah, jeez.
That was my favorite moment.
I was just gonna say, I pretty much feel like we all landed on the same place in this because like, you guys were saying the gameplay feels totally arbitrary and it's not where the good of the game is, and it kind of reminds me of what we were saying about Trails in the Sky, where like all these gameplay segments are not necessarily the best part of the game, and like you feel like
was playing it.
yeah, you feel like you're going through the paces sometimes, but like Josh said, if it's optional and it's something you go back and discover for yourself after you like know a little more and you get like a little replay value out of it or something, like I think that enhances the experience overall instead of putting up these barriers. Like I tried to get my 55-year-old mom to play this game, and just, like she was like, I'm really interested, but I don't know what to do. I was like, that's really too bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I actually don't
At the
think I
very
landed in the same place in the game as everybody else. Like, I don't think I have the same final opinion. I overall don't like the game.
See, I just thought the story in general was just so poignant. Like I was totally into it by the end of it, and I can't believe it took me this long to actually play the game because I'm Mike from not other Mike Salvato actually
Okay.
gave me a copy when I joined RPG Fan. And I hadn't played it. It's been sitting in my thing since then, in my Steam library. So this was a good opportunity to actually like clear that out. But I'm really glad I actually got around to playing it because I was totally invested by the end of the story. I thought it was really interesting.
Which I'm happy to hear, because for me it took so long to get through certain parts of it. I was like, you know what, I don't care anymore. Like, you as a main character, Johnny, were really crappy to supposedly this girl. So I don't like you. Wyatt, the doctor, I thought was an idiot. And so you just like, as we would delve deeper, you start looking at some of these characters and like, you seemed alright, you seemed like you wanted something, and you got just a bum hand, like life dealt you wrong. And then as it kind of goes on, it's like, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't like you, I don't understand what's going on with you. And at some point, it's like, I don't care about any of you. And so I really like the story. It's a fascinating premise to be able. I mean, this is basically they mashed up Inception with Memento, which
Yeah, it's a good comparison.
I mean, because you're always moving backwards in time. You're trying to figure out where you came from, so you're never really on solid ground with that. But then you're trying to insert memories. It's fascinating. Like, the idea is brilliant, and I think the story, like the actual story beats when you look at it, and it's like, that's a pivotal moment. Like, that is, I really enjoy that. I liked what they were doing. But by the time I got to all of those, I just had zero connection to the game.
I think you not liking the characters is kind of intended.
Oh, absolutely.
Because like I feel like one of the things they're driving home with this game is like people are not what they seem. Like if you look into someone's past, if you figure out why they are the way they are, you can start to feel compassion. You can start to feel empathy. It's really trying to teach you about like what makes people who they are. Like you feel like by the end of the game that you know so much about Johnny's life by having gone through like from back to front, like what his experience was.
And Josh, you made the comparisons to Inception and Memento, which are, oddly both Christopher Nolan movies, but also both apt, fair comparisons. The movie comparison that I make that's maybe a little bit more unlikely is 500 Days of Summer, which is a rom-com from a couple of years ago with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel in it. And the thing that I got the most out of this game was, sort of also on the concept of memory, how Johnny, I think, remembers his relationship with his wife as sort of beautiful and awesome and amazing, and maybe they were perfect for each other. But really, when you examine their relationship from an outsider's perspective, it was messed up. They were it wasn't a happy marriage, especially for River, and that he remembers the relationship differently from how it actually was is maybe even a little startling for the player, that it wasn't an idyllic marriage. And going back and I thought that, like, River's character arc was incredibly tragic because she was in love with him and he didn't remember why she was in love with him. And I thought that was just so sad and beautiful. It was like that revelation as to how they met as children was, I thought, like the biggest part of the game, that it didn't totally sell the game for me exactly, but I thought it was like the perfect cap off to how this game was about a screwed up romance where the different characters didn't view it the same way, almost like Braid in that way. It's whatever. I thought it was a great game. I agree it was tedious at times and maybe it didn't need all of those sliding puzzles and as such slow progression during the main story, but overall I was really happy with it and I'm glad I played it. I rambled a bit too long there. Sorry, guys.
No, that's
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I wish I had the exact feeling that you have, Mike. And it's kind of disappointing. Like, it didn't connect with me. I thought it was really artfully done with the story. Like, exactly the moment that you said, like, she does not understand. And you can tell she's trying to have him remember by always asking him, like, the questions.
And that's why she's building all those paper rabbits, so he can maybe remember how they first met, but he doesn't, and because of her condition, which I think it's high functioning autism. I'm not. They never really say outright what it is, but like, because of her condition, she isn't as able to clearly or easily express to him what she's trying to say by always asking him the same questions and building all of those rabbits. It was I thought River, like, how they handled the character of River was beautiful and tragic, and was maybe my favorite part of the characterization of the game.
Oh, she's hands down my favorite character.
I love how subtly they handle that whole topic. Like you said, they never come out and say it. It kind of encourages the player to kind of like Google that author and try to figure out what's going on and learn more about it.
Dude, what is it? Is it a form of autism or Asperger's?
It's Asperger's.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's actually smart that they never say it. It's frustrating as the player, because you just want to know, because they're always like, oh, I know what it is. Oh, for sure it's this now. And it's like, well, why can't you just say, like, 2 more words so I know for sure that I'm thinking the same thing? But I think it's smart because it does, I don't know, it adds to the kind of mystery of her as a person. And it would be kind of cheapening it by just saying, hey, here's the story. You don't have to figure out this and anything else. Just like, here's everything you need to know. And I hate when they do those like info dumps in a lot of games, and they were smart to avoid that. I thought it was super interesting, though, that... Go ahead, Davey.
Sorry, I was just going to say, in like a lot of writing from like not even that long ago, but like earlier in the 1900s, like 1950s and 1940s, you like see a lot of medical conditions just arbitrarily referred to as schizophrenia all the time. And like over time, sure, the way we define things like changes, and it can kind of date things or make them seem insensitive in retrospective.
Yeah, that's true. That's smart. I didn't think of that. I thought it was interesting, though, that so Johnny has his best friend that he had throughout his whole life, basically.
Yeah, Nicholas.
What are the chances of him and Nicholas being with women that have the exact same condition?
Yeah, that was that really seemed like a plot point of convenience, having Isabel around to describe autism or Asperger's in the interesting way. Because in one of the segments with them as adults, she mentions that her job is being an actress, but because of her condition, she had to be an actress her whole life. That was a really cool bit of dialogue describing the condition, I thought. But it was,
and I liked how
she was basically around just to make that comparison.
Yeah, because she's not really in any other scenes.
I did
Not
like
very many
how
others.
they kind of have it set up so that like Isabel and River kind of have different backgrounds, and like there were different moments in their lives where they became aware of their condition, and that changed how they were able to function in society. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. But so having the friend, I can't remember her name.
Isabel or Nicholas?
Isabel, thank you. Having Isabel in it, and because it's a sci-fi story, was actually what threw me for the loop, that moved me away from thinking it was something like Asperger's. It was like, hey, this is like a sci-fi story. Maybe this is something that's more pronounced throughout society. That's where I was like, the sci-fi almost bled in too much, and that's what made me second guess it. It was like, hey, maybe this is more common than I thought. Like, just for some reason, River just never got the help that she needed, so it turned into this. I was like, and then at one point I was like, well, does Johnny have it? Is that why he's weird? Like, why is that why he can't handle things as well? And then you find out it's obviously it's because his brother got hit by his mom with a car. But
Man.
which was, I will admit, even though
man, that I didn't see that Johnny stuff coming. I just thought his mom
That
was sort
scene
of odd.
hurts.
Yeah.
It was forecasted pretty well.
No, the foreshadowing is good. It's just I didn't pick up on it because I'm dense, and I only picked up on it by re-examining it, which is that's how the best foreshadowing happens. Like, good foreshadowing surprises you and then has you re-examine the earlier part of the story and get new context from it, or get more out of it. And I thought it was a good twist in that regard, but it is a bit of a gut punch. I mean,
It totally is.
Yeah.
And
So
I was just going to say, I think Josh mentioned earlier the pacing of the game is a little off, especially in regards to the gameplay segments. But I think in terms of because the game is not very long. Like, I beat it in 1 4-hour sitting, and like that's fairly short. And like, I feel like because of that, the pacing of the story is really good, because you don't have like, it's not like a lot of games that are like even 10 20-hour games that'll have like foreshadowing and stuff, but like, it's still like, if you're going to play it in multiple sittings and you're not going to have like the fact that you can brew a cup of coffee and just sit down and play this and get the whole story and pick up on all those little clues and foreshadowing and have it all come together. It's kind of like watching a long movie.
right. Yeah, I think a long movie is a good comparison to it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say too.
But so even like, I had my complaints, like I was disattached from the characters, like I didn't like where the story was going. When the Joey scene happened, I had like, when Eva freaks out, I was like, we need to get back right away. That's when I had my light bulb moment. It's like, I think this is bad. And then like, because she was like, don't you remember how the room was, like, and then like, that's like what put it together. And that whole part, even though I did not like Johnny, I didn't like the characters at this point, that was, even for me, was a gut like punch. Like, that was like, wow, that's terrible. That really sucks. This is awful. And so, and I think that's a compliment to the writing and the story of it, that for somebody that became disenchanted with the whole game, for that to be still have like an emotional resonance beyond just, hey, this is terrible, somebody died that I never met. So I thought that was, it like actually turned, like I had been fully done with it, and then that happened, and I was like, you know what, this isn't bad. Like that was what made it so I could get through the rest of the game, or want to get through the rest of the game.
I kind of wanted to ask you guys, since you guys are all pretty big movie buffs, how you felt about that cinematic climax, because like that thing takes me for a ride, but I'm not big into cinema, so I don't know if I'm just like out of my depth or whatever.
I thought it was handled really well, especially the way with the whole concept being that they're basically doing this on Johnny's deathbed, and they fulfill his wish pretty much at the last possible moment. So the way they had the scene set up so that like you kind of talk to the other characters, and then you go and you're watching the rocket ship fly off, and then they have River's there because she joins NASA in the like alternate timeline they made, and then they're holding hands, as the heart monitor starts to like bleep into the background of the soundtrack. I think that's really well done, and then it kind of fades as the heart monitor flatlines, and I'm just like, and that again, that's another scene where I was just that hurt
Yeah,
in like the best possible way.
I was really surprised how at sort of the most well executed plot moments and cinematic moments in the game, because I didn't think that you could do that in a RPG Maker engine. When they set up moments like that, it's almost always really well done, and even things like how they position the camera during scenes where the player isn't in control is feels very cinematic and sort of like, you know, well, I want to describe it in a way other than well positioned, but I'm just not smart enough to, I guess. Right. And it's a really well, I mean, working within its technological framework, it's a really well executed game and it adds weight to all of the biggest story moments in really smart ways.
Oh, for sure.
I guess Kangao continues to deliver that on that in Bird Story, which tells a really good story without any dialogue.
I played Bird Story a year or two ago. I was listening to its soundtrack, editing tracks for Music of the Year 2014, and I liked the music so much that I just played the game in one sitting and just absolutely adored it.
I literally bought Bird Story after I finished To the Moon.
Nice. I think I might want to replay it now, actually. But it's he really has a great knack for blending these brilliant soundtracks with these poignant game story moments. And he does it in games and not in short films, which makes it, you know, really interesting and more relevant to my interests.
And the cool thing too is Bird Story is like a prelude to Finding Paradise, which is going to be like the second episode, the continuation of To the Moon, another one of these type of stories where they go back into someone's memories, and it's going to be the kid from Bird Story this time, but grown up. And I thought they've basically got endless potential for stories here. Like there's a lot of really interesting ways they could take this.
That sounds like a game I 100% want to play.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm totally in now. Like, and the cool thing is too is they released a couple of free DLC episodes, which I played last night. And that take place at SigCorp, like the headquarters of the company that the two scientists work for, Eva and Neil. And you get a little bit more backstory on them, more so than you did by watching their interactions in To the Moon. And at the end, and a little bit of really bizarre sequel hook at the end.
Okay.
It's
Why don't you explain that?
Okay,
I never played them. I never played these. Did you play the extra episodes, Davey?
I didn't. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's okay. But like the first one is they're both kind of poignant, like not in the same sense as To the Moon. Like they're a little jokier and they give more background on both the characters. But at the end of episode 2, it ends with almost a glitch in the Matrix type thing, where like it shows Eva like walking out of the office building, and all of a sudden like the screen crackles and it shows her like wearing one of those helmets that they use to enter people's dreams, and she's like alone in a room, and then it like crackles back in and repeats the previous dialogue. And there's a couple other little references that seem to hint that like Neil, the male scientist, is doing something like weird with the memory machines, like he's experimenting on himself. So there's a lot of weird, really interesting stuff that's introduced in those DLC episodes that seems to hint that not all is as it seems, and I'm really quite interested actually to see if anything they're planning on doing with that.
It's interesting because there is kind of some foreshadowing with some interactions with Eva and Neil about, because Neil keeps talking about how Johnny is such like a miserable person, like awkward, like things aren't going well, he keeps getting shot down for these things. Like Neil always has these quick like one-liners, like basically making fun of him. And then every time Eva's like, well, don't you see how much you two are alike? So it's intriguing that there'd be he'd be using kind of his job as an opportunity to possibly make his memories better.
Yeah, and that's something I was thinking, because there's also Neil is taking painkillers, that becomes a plot point into the moon. It's
Yeah,
actually the very
yeah,
last scene.
Yeah, towards the end, they even say it's maybe the same condition that Johnny has.
So
Right?
if there's some kind of like screwed up memory in Neil's past that he's trying to forget or something, and like they show like in the second episode that he has a really strained relationship with his family. Like the episodes are like holiday special, so they take place on Christmas. And they show him like picking up the phone and like calling his dad, but he won't speak to him. Like his dad, like he has the phone open, but he isn't talking into it. He's just like listening to his dad, like asking who it is, and like scenes like that. Like it's really interesting.
That does sound interesting.
Yeah, it's worth playing. I think they're worth playing through. You can beat both episodes in like an hour.
I never imagined him taking that setting into like a greater scope like that. That's super freaking exciting.
Yeah,
wow.
for sure.
Like in retrospect, I didn't even think about this as a sci-fi game because like it's got a sci-fi setting, but like it's got trees, not rivets. You know what I mean?
Right. It's kind of more
I
like
get what
you
you're
think
saying.
it's natural.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, Inception could reasonably take place in the real world, except there's technology that let you jump into people's dreams. So it's a sci-fi movie instead of being an action movie. This is only a sci-fi game because of the technology at hand. Otherwise, it could just be if we experience the game linearly, it would just be a tragic romance that had the twist happen at the beginning instead of the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any of you? Well, I know Davey, you have not. Peter or Mike, have you guys watched Memento Forward?
I haven't, but I know you can do that.
Yeah, I've only seen it in the cinematic presentation and not the chronological presentation.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's still a good movie, but you lose a lot of that. And I don't even know where I'm going with this.
Well, I think I have an idea where you're going with this. Some stories really use that non-linear storytelling method really well that enhances the impact of the story. And I would agree that is true for both Memento and To the Moon.
Yeah.
Because both stories lose something if they were just extremely straightforward stories.
There we go.
But because neither of them are, there's more unknowns and more mystery to them that results in a more satisfying payoff once all of the plot cards are on the table.
Yeah, so there we go. I was trying to think of why. And so a perfect example of that is Joey dying. If you go from the start with that, then the whole game you'd be sympathetic to Johnny, even when he's doing kind of those bad, like where you're kind of a sleazeball right now. It makes it so that you're like always in the back of your mind. I was like, well, he had a terrible childhood. Like that's not fair to judge him like this. And you'd view him as a character in his relationship very differently.
Yeah, and instead the whole existence of Joey comes as a surprise.
Yeah,
and the knowledge of Johnny's memory loss and of Joey's death near the beginning of his life has you re-examine Johnny's behavior and sympathize with him after the fact instead of throughout the whole story. And it's effective. I really dug the presentation of this game in general. Like Peter said, if Kangao wants to move forward with more games like this starring Ava and Neil, I mean, I'll play all of them. It's To the Moon was really cool, and more games like this is something I'm in favor of.
So that being said, can I express my one major story complaint?
Only one?
Yeah.
All right.
It kind of sums up into this. So we've already talked about how Johnny's kind of an unlikable character, right? And you guys can correct me if I'm interpreting how the technology works incorrectly. But when they change things in the past, those don't actually happen. It just happens in his memory, correct?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
It's like they're planting memories.
And that kind of sours the ending for me. I think the true main character of this is actually River, not Johnny. And with that, you view Johnny as their interactions with what he can remember as being very selfish. And ultimately, at the end, it's still extremely tragic because, and again, it's him being selfish because he wants to have that perfect ending, but he wasn't willing to do anything or be involved for any of it. And so River still tragically is, like, forgotten.
It's definitely tragic. No, I would agree that River's story is still tragic. And I think that's kind of the point, too, is that in real life, you're kind of seeing Johnny's dying memory is going to be just that. It's the ideal what could have been. And even if they've convinced him in his last moments that it was real, like, it wasn't real. And their real life was this tragic, sad story. But that's kind of the point, and that's where you get into the ethical. And actually, this is another thing they talk about in the DLC episodes. There's actually people protesting what they do outside of their building, and it raises the ethical dilemmas of convincing someone that they lived a different life.
Yeah, I don't.
The whole thing. It's kind of just like a compact metaphor for dying without regrets. Like, that's what they're providing, a service for people at a cost. Like, hey, buy this and you can die without any regrets.
Yeah, but I feel like it takes away some of the meaningfulness of the ending. So obviously technology does not work this way, but imagine if the ending was that River and Johnny actually made up and they had this beautiful life together and this successful marriage and whatnot. And so it's a sham to everybody outside of that machine. And I think for me, then, viewing it as an outsider, it's a sham to me because it's not real.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I don't disagree with you that Johnny's ultimate motivation for this is selfishness, and that it's, having it be this beautiful ending in his dream doesn't mean that anything's changed outside the dream. I basically agree with you there, but I didn't have, I guess, as much of a problem with it as you did, because I don't know. I mean, River's a tragic character in that Johnny was in love with her, but ultimately never understood her, so it was an unhappy marriage for River, at least. And I in a way, I think her tragic marriage still existing, but him understanding her and having a happy marriage in his dream is in a way okay. Just because at least at the end he was finally able to understand her in a way. And yeah, I mean, look, if you want a happy ending and want and resent that the tragedy of the story still exists and isn't really fixed in the story, then I mean that's just not how you enjoy this game, I guess. I mean, I'm stumbling over my words now, but I didn't have the same issues with the ending as you did, Josh, I guess.
I think it was definitely meant to be melancholic and a really deep-seated negative. Like, it's all worthless in the end, but like it kind of makes you examine like what's really important in the end. And from Johnny's perspective, like, he got what he needed. Like, yeah, that's it. I mean, honestly, I think if you don't leave this game with like those really conflicted feelings, you aren't like examining like what it kind of makes you like examine how you're going to feel on your deathbed. Like, what are the things you're going to regret and wish for? And it kind of makes you re-examine your life in that way. And I feel like that's kind of a deeper seated meaning, something you can take away with this game. In the same way that the way they tell the story backwards, like, that's what it's like when you meet people. Like, you meet someone and you don't know why they're the crappy person they are. But like, if you were to give them the benefit of the doubt and learn their perspective, you might figure out the kind of person that's underneath. Those are good messages.
So, are we supposed to view Johnny then as a flawed hero?
I wouldn't even call him a hero.
What would you call him?
He's just a main character. He's just a flawed character.
Flawed protagonist.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's the other thing is, and this is where I view him overwhelmingly as just a very, very selfish person. I view how he treated River when she was younger as selfish. I view their whole relationship. I view the ending as like the ultimate act of selfishness because he just wants to whitewash everything.
I'm a little bit more sympathetic to him than you are, I guess, because he is selfish, but ultimately he was in love with River and he wanted to understand her, but he couldn't. And part of why he had so much trouble was because of her condition. She couldn't express herself well, and he had this thing with those with the beta blockers messing with his memory. So he was selfish, and he was in a way cruel to River, but it wasn't totally his choice. It wasn't all his fault that he was like that, and that makes him a little more sympathetic.
as I'm thinking it over too, he mentions when you first talk to Johnny, like in his like initial memory state, and you're asking him what his final wish is, and he says he wants to go to the moon. He doesn't remember why he wants to go to the moon. He just
Right, yeah.
does. And the reason he doesn't remember is because of the beta blockers, his repressed memories, and the fact that that had to do with River, his actual first meeting with River. So his love of River, his relationship with River, and his desire to go to the moon are intrinsically linked. So the fact that they did, in a way, get that happy ending by going to the moon is sort of the ideal of, if Johnny had been a different person, if he had been a better person, if he'd remembered that, if things hadn't gone the way they did, they might have been able to accomplish that together. But Johnny, the person we meet, doesn't remember all that. He's missing those crucial memories that made him who he is. And
I would agree with what you're saying, Peter, that if you remember those, that it would be this great love story. And that's kind of what you get with the ending. But I would disagree with you, Mike, that he's not in love with River. He's in love with the concept of River. And I think that's the conversation you have in high school or school or whatever grade they were in, when he's talking about how she's shy and she's unique because she's different. I don't think he cares about her as an individual. I think he cares about her about.
But they talk about that in the game too, how that's a problem for that's the basis for their relationship, and they're doomed.
Yes, but I also, in a way, I disagree. I think he was always in love with River, like ever since he was a kid, and meeting her again in high school, like, had him unconsciously, like, awake to these feelings, to these repressed feelings that he had for her.
Yeah.
Maybe
and then he had to rationalize it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't think we're going to come to an agreement on this, but I think he was always in love with her, but didn't always understand why he was in love with her, and acted selfishly, in part because of his memory being messed up. I guess maybe I'm less down on Johnny than you are.
I am too. And the one thing that I feel like we've kind of skimmed over is like the idea of my wife choosing to die for anything else, like for something material, like that would destroy me. That would be like an infinitely unbearable amount of baggage to carry with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that was screwed up. But I can also see why she'd want that instead.
She was still trying to communicate that memory to him.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Davey, but it harkens back to Memento, where like the main character doesn't believe that the guide can't remember her, or like remember certain events, so she ends up having, sorry, spoilers for Memento, she tests it to the point that he literally kills her. And in a certain regard, there's a lot of parallels to that with this. That she is pushing him to her maximum that she can, to the point that she does die, because she desperately wants him to remember. And I don't know. I could connect with River so much easier, which is ironic because they make it so that she's so hard to connect to.
Yeah, part of her psychological condition is literally that she has difficulty connecting to others.
Right. And the entire time, like, I felt awful for her. I absolutely sympathize with her.
Well, by the middle of the game, I sympathize with her. At the very beginning, I thought that she was, maybe slightly disturbed or had a mental illness and didn't really get what was happening. But once I figured out everything, it swayed all of my sympathies with her and Johnny. At first I was less sympathetic with it.
They do such a good job building up that mystique around her when you don't even know what the game is about. You're like, what does this mean? And it could like be literally anything at that point. Like, you can't
Is this game about
even guess.
space or lighthouses?
Right.
What's with all the origami rabbits?
Yeah.
What is
and
so
the
important
creepy
about this
music,
platypus?
like everything. Yeah.
Did any of you read the webcomic?
There's a webcomic?
Yeah,
I didn't read the webcomic.
He made a webcomic that is about, after it's in the dream, after Johnny and River go to the moon, the platypus and the paper rabbit try to go to the moon to follow them. It's really funny.
That is really funny. Yeah. And
what a funny guy he is.
Going back to kind of what Mike said, where we're just not going to come to an agreement. I think beyond any of my personal feelings about this game, I think that truly shows, at the very least, story-wise, how great of a game it is. That it can build a conversation like this, have a discussion, handle a piece of kind of storyline that it's so dark at its core. Throw in humor so that it is funny, that we can be laughing about certain situations where it's like, overall, this is terrible. And then evoke actual feelings in us. So I like I said, I'm not gung ho about the game, but I think what is there is brilliant, and if nothing else, it's something that, as a listener, you deserve to experience, because there is very few games that are capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Crickets. There we go. Wow.
The number
Sorry
one thing
about
I
that.
forgot about this game, the number one thing I forgot about To the Moon is how funny it is. Like I was laughing at the same jokes. Yeah, I forgot. Like it was a good chuckle fest.
Neil and Eva have a really good rapport with each other. Like,
Yep.
I could easily see them like a mini series about them,
And
like just
Yeah.
going off on adventures.
I'm like, they're actually two of my favorite parts of the whole game, is they're kind of back and forth and seeing how they figured things out. So the fact that there are mini episodes and they're centered kind of around them, or mainly around them, makes me want to play those. And then if they were characters in the next game that he's working on, I would for sure be in, because I did like their back and forth.
Yeah, I'm really interested in playing those DLC episodes now. They were Neil and Ava never really took over the story. It was always sort of about Johnny's life, but having them as passengers and sort of stand-ins for the player, just observing this, was a smart way to handle it. And I mean, going back to what Davey said, it helped a lot that that Neil was really funny and the game's jokes hit well because these are funny characters doing funny things. Like when Neil is having a long bar conversation with Johnny, and is eating jar after jar of pickled olives and Eva refuses to turn off the taste simulators, was just, I mean, it was a little bit, it was kind of a Bugs Bunny cartoon, but it was hilarious. It was a great moment. And this game balances the tragedy and the comedy really smartly, even though it's ultimately sort of a melancholy game. It's almost all of its notes hit for me, and I thought the writing was strong in general.
I think that mix is what gives it such a movie vibe too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair. Absolutely.
A couple of typos notwithstanding. Which you get that. I'm not like I'm not going to be the English major who docks points because of grammatical errors, but a couple near the beginning made me chuckle a bit.
Yeah. And I noticed those at the beginning. Do they keep having those throughout the game? Because I only noticed them at the beginning. I didn't see them. I didn't seem to notice them as it went on.
If there were, I either was too invested and didn't notice, or they just weren't there. Yeah. It just seemed like at the beginning they forgot to proofread a sentence or something.
Oh, anybody have any other closing thoughts they kind of want to have for the game?
I'm really excited for Finding Paradise now. Also, I think this marks the first time I've played a game on my Steam accounts in like a year, because I hardly ever touch Steam.
Right.
My laptop's kind of a piece. It works fine, but it's not really great for gaming.
I think the OSTs to all of Kangao's games are free on his Bandcamp, so everyone should go listen to those.
Well,
maybe they'll motivate you to check out the story.
They're not free. I think they might even be pay what you want, but they're reasonably priced, and I encourage listeners to check out the OSTs for To the Moon and for Bird Story, because the music is really gorgeous in both of those games. And I guess my final thoughts on this game was it's a sort of like a sad short story that you play like in a 16-bit RPG, even though it's basically a visual novel. And if any of that sounds good to you, I urge you to play it, even though we've spoiled all of it.
I know what I wanted to say. I was really worried that after not playing this game for so many years, that it was not going to be as great as I remembered, and like playing this game was like kind of the start to my falling back in love with fiction, and like I started reading a lot more. I got into a lot of more visual novels and different forms of storytelling and stuff. And like I was really worried after all that I'd come back to Tooth and Moon and be really disappointed in the story. But man, I still feel like this writing is there. Like the irony and the torment and the melancholy. It's so powerful.
It was like reading a really good book that had an unusual narrative device around it. In this case, the nonlinear story, and then it had just a beautiful soundtrack to accompany it. It feels so unique and so effective. I just loved this. I really did.
Yeah, I think after I finished it, I kind of think that if you're the kind of person who's interested in narrative in video games, then To the Moon is definitely something you should experience.
And it's only like $8 in 4 hours, so what are you doing? Really? Come on. Don't be like Josh. Actually play and try to enjoy this game.
Wow.
Don't be like Josh.
I'm pretty sure he played it.
Well,
I think he's just upset that I'm dead inside, so I can't have feelings.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I'm sure you are
feelings
not
gone
dead
home.
inside. But you didn't finish the game, and you didn't like the game, and I think if you had finished it, maybe you would change your tune a bit.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay. And also, I mean, you're living with a baby now, so you probably aren't getting enough sleep.
I love
Just-
that's always the excuse I'm able to pull out. It's, hey,
Well, you're-
baby.
You're gonna have that excuse for at least another year or so.
Yeah.
So
I hope.
I was actually playing.
Okay,
So I was trying
alright.
to furiously finish it this morning, and in one arm, holding a baby, the other arm I was holding my 360 controller, pressing X furiously, trying to get through the dialogue options. It's like, come on.
That's a great image.
Yeah.
Actually,
I actually played this game with a mouse, and the pathfinding wasn't great, but it's played surprisingly okay with only mouse clicks.
They
Yeah,
did something interesting with the 360 controller. The default controls were X and B, which usually it's X and A for everything for like that type of stuff, and B would be out. But they did X and A as if it was left and right click mouse, which I thought was interesting.
What does right click even do in this game?
It
it opens the menu.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. I would always just hit escape for the menu.
Yeah, you can theoretically play most of the game with just the mouse, aside from a couple of those contextual, like the horse riding bit.
Hmm.
Of course.
But
Yep.
if
Oh, I should have realized that equine therapy is a treatment for Asperger's. I should. Oh, that's what they were doing. I just realized that.
yeah, they mention it too.
They do.
Blew
Alright.
your mind.
Light bulb.
No, it
off.
didn't blow my mind. I just
If
never
we're gonna-
realized that was the specific condition until I guess I just made that connection. I was playing the game, I guess half asleep, going, "Oh, okay, they're riding horses now. That's nice. The horse
If we're
moves
gonna
faster
talk
than
about-
walking."
Minor little gripes with To the Moon, that the when you're trying to collect all the memory links and then open the last like little gate at the end of that section, the spacing on that is so precise. Like you have to be in like just the right position to be able to click on it. So I spent like another 5 minutes like running around being like, what am I missing? Until I realized that you just have to be like positioned like just so on the horse, because you can't get off the horse. You just have to wing it.
Yeah, for a minute I was curious if the horse was going to travel with me back into Johnny's teenage years.
It should have.
Never happened.
That'd been fantastic. I think that's gonna do it for us talking about To the Moon.
Yep.
To the moon.
As we kind of started the podcast, we have one more game this month that we're playing. It's gonna be Juniper's Knot. Everybody
Yeah.
should give it a try because it is free. You can't really complain about free. And I've heard Davey talk about this game multiple times, so it better actually be good.
Well, for $0, the price is right.
That is true. And then, as we mentioned last podcast, in March we are going to be playing through Nier. So
Yay!
I'm intrigued by that. I've heard widely different opinions about it.
It's so fascinating,
So
and I thought
think
it was
that-
a lot of fun.
I think Nier was poorly received by the mainstream press, but a lot of people in RPG circles really love it. So it's
that's fair.
it's maybe a little polarizing, but yeah, should be interesting to listen to the Retro Encounter crew play through it.
yeah, the polarizing part of the game, say that 10 times fast, is actually what makes me excited. I think there'll be some really good dialogue surrounding it. So
Oh, for sure.
So you guys will have to check back next month for that, but please check back even closer than that to listen to Juniper's Knot. In the meantime, you can send in any of your thoughts to retro@rpgfan.com. You can jump on our boards at rpgfan.com and go to the forums and go to the boards and say what you want, and we'll try to listen, or we'll say hateful things back to you instead. And then, as always, you can go to iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. Please put in good reviews, good comments. That really helps the podcast get seen by other places. But yeah, that's going to do it for us at Retro Encounter. Thank you for listening.
Good night, everybody.
Goodbye. Oh.
Bye.
That sounded like the Welcome to Nightville goodbye. You can't use that.
Goodbye.
Goodbye,
Nightvale.
Retro Encounter.